Hello students, welcome to Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. I remain your literature teacher, and today we want to look at a non-African poem titled The Non-Priest's Tale, The Non-Priest's Tale by Geoffrey Chaucer.
Eko Learners Support, a support program of the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education for WAEC and NECO candidates.
Okay, let's look at the objectives of this lesson. At the end of this lesson, you will explain the poem. You'll be able to discuss the major themes of the poem. And of course, you'll be able to identify some poetic devices used in the poem and even use them in creative writing. Okay, so let's look at the summary of the poem. A poor widow lives in a small cottage with her two daughters. Our main possession is a hallowed cock called Chanticleer, who stays in a yard surrounded with battlements. Okay? Now this rooster is beautiful, and nowhere in the land is there any cock who can match him when it comes to crowing. Kokoroko! So he thinks of 7 lovely hens. The dearest of these is the beautiful and gracious Lady Petilot. So maybe you're surprised that even cocks, have choices of the woman they want, or they have special favorites amongst their wives. Okay, this Lady Petilot holds the Art of Chanticleer and even shares in his glory and all his poems and all his problems. Okay? Now, Chanticleer had a terrible dream. He was being chased by a fox who attempted to kill him. And when he woke up from this dream, he was really scared, and he shares this dream with his favorite wife, Lady Petilot. Lady Petilot thinks that dreams are just mere dreams and should not be taken seriously, and that he should just live his life as usual. But Chanticleer insists that no, this dream is a serious dream, and I believe in the tale that dreams have meaning. Well, since Lady Petilot has always stayed with him only because they have agreed, this time there was no oneness in their speech, and she decides that she was going to leave him. So he left Chanticleer to his fate. And Chanticleer went about looking for solution to his problem. Okay? So his dream comes true eventually. A fox named Don Russell in the just around the battlement chases him and snatches him off the yard and tries to kill him. Now, how in the first place did the fox get to snatch Chanticleer from the yard? The fox came around and started to praise him, started to adore his beauty, started to say that, oh, you are beautiful. Don't forget that the poet mentioned once that his wings are burnished brown, his bill very dark and shiny, just like the knight's armor. And this glory often makes him proud. It overwhelms him so much. And when the fox came around, that was the same tool that the fox uses, to capture him. So we call it flattery. Flattery. You're beautiful, you're great, you're wonderful. And Chanticleer falls for this trick. And Don Russell comes closer and suddenly snatched Chanticleer while he was closing his eyes and enjoying the flattery. And then, just like you can see on the screen a picture of some villagers and other people chasing after something. They were actually chasing Don Russell, the fox. Now, how did Chanticleer escape from this grip? When they got to a particular point, Chanticleer told Don Russell and said, these people will not stop chasing you. They will chase you until they kill you. So the best thing for you is to turn back, scare them, scream at them, shout at them, so that they'll be scared and then they'll also retreat from their chase. Don Russell thinks that that's a good idea and he tries it out. But just when he was about to scream, he mistakenly drops Chanticleer and Chanticleer escapes. Beautiful story. One of the stories from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which is actually a mock heroic. All right. At the conclusion of the tale, the host praises the non-priests, observing the priest's magnificent physique. It looks like the host is trying to do the same thing that Don Russell did to Chanticleer. But, well, he did not really fall for it. He just moved on as usual. Okay, now, it's important for us to understand that Geoffrey Chaucer is well known for fables, which is usually deployed to correct specific ills in the society, especially moral problems, used to provide didactics. You know, when you say something is didactic, it means that it teaches moral lessons. Okay? So the moral lesson here is that flattery is bad, and one must not be overwhelmed with pride and flattery. Okay? So this tale is told using the technique of the mock heroic, which takes a trivial event and elevates it into something of great universal import. Now, don't forget that the version of this poem that you'll be reading for WAEC and NECO is a shortened version. And at the beginning of the poem, there was a reference to a poor widow. She had only 2 daughters and a cottage and then a yard where she farms. You know, she's poor. A lot of similes and tropes were used to explain how poor she is. She feeds on a very dainty meal, the dainty morsel. She does not have access to piquants. She literally lives her life like a poor widow, a poor woman. Okay? Now, she is the original owner of Chanticleer. But Chanticleer is described as a very powerful, wealthy, great person. And this was deployed majorly to draw out a contrast between the rich and the poor in the society. And the sharp contrast that was created here was an attempt by Geoffrey Chaucer to show that there shouldn't be boundaries between the rich and the poor, because even out of the poor, riches can come out. Okay, so just like I said, very trivial matter. A cock has other, concubines and wives around him, and then a fox comes to chase the cock, and that's just normal things that are normal that happens. But by the time he writes it and brings it into poetry, it helps us to create a sense of understanding of our society. So that's what mock heroic does. All right. Now let's look at some of the themes that we have in the poem. First, we have the theme of poverty. Like I told you, we saw the story of the woman, the original owner of the cock, Chanticleer, or the rooster. Now, poverty is depicted by the things you own generally in the society. However, we are made to see a different light of poverty here, that you might have something that is of great value that someone else also wants. Just like Don Russell. Don Russell is the name of a real person, but was given to a fox. And he craves so much to have the rooster in the yard. So we see the issue of poverty, and I just mentioned that poverty is contrasted with riches and there has to be a balance in the society. Okay, and then we have riches and responsibility. Don't forget that in the poem, in the second and third stanza of the poem, we saw that Chanticleer can crow so quickly, so perfectly, and he doesn't miss his time. As a matter of fact, when we continue, you will see how that he is even faster and more accurate than the clock. Okay, then we also have the issue of contentment. In the second stanza of the poem, we are meant to see that the woman, the poor widow, was not disturbed by her state. She is just very okay and content with what she has. So she doesn't go ahead to try to take other people's things. She's okay. That shows contentment. But I think it's a contrast with that of Chanticleer himself, the rich. So this creates the idea of the rich gets richer, wants to be richer, and the poor might just remain the way they want to be or the way they are. Okay, we saw that Chanticleer is not satisfied with just one wife. He goes ahead to have concubines, have a lot of them. All right. Then we also have the theme of love. The theme of love. Of course, we saw how in one of the pictures how Chanticleer and Pétillotte share ideas, share thoughts, stay together. Of course, that's the part of the poem that depicts love. Okay, and then we also have other themes like avarice and greed, like I just mentioned, and then excessive flattery and its consequences, just like the case with Chanticleer and Don Russell the Fox. All right, now let's look at some poetic devices in this poem. The first here is simile. Simile, and like you know, simile is a comparison between two things using words like as, like, or even than. Now, we see here that there's a comparison between comb, the comb of Chanticleer, or Chanticleer's comb, and then the fine coral, using the word than. So he says comb was redder than fine coral. That's a simile. And that simile helped us to see how beautiful Chanticleer's head was. Now, we also have shone as bright as jet. As bright as jet. Well, that's what when he was talking about Chanticleer's bill. Okay? And then we also have like burnished gold, his feathers flaming bright. So the use of like here to compare feathers to gold or to burnished gold, yeah, expresses simile. All right, now let's move on to the next. We have personification. Personification. While the poet tried to describe or was describing the poverty of the widow, he uses words like expressions like kitchen melancholy. Of course, we know that only humans can feel melancholy or can be in a state of melancholy or sadness or sorrow. But here we see that it's the kitchen that is sad, which is not possible. So this is a transfer of human qualities to non-humans or non-human objects or things. Okay, and apart from that, this melancholy is an emotion. It's an emotion, yeah. So when you transfer human emotions to something that is not human, there's another name that we call it. We call it pathetic fallacy. Okay, please take note of that. Then we have other personifications there like slender male. How can a male be slender like human being? Then we also have repletion never left her in disquiet. All these are just to show that she had very little and she was poor. Very little, she was poor. Repletion is a thing, it's an abstract idea, and he's saying it as if repletion is human, that never left her to be quiet. She's always very, very quiet. She cannot start doing things because she doesn't have much. Okay. Now there is also another which is dainty morsel. This word dainty is usually used to appraise somebody of a quiet countenance, a woman who is small in stature but very quiet and full of grace. Yes. And this muscle beside it is like your fufu or your eba or your akpu, you know. And how can you say that your akpu is dainty? That's human quality, but we are using this to express that it's very small in quantity, obviously. And that expresses the theme of poverty. Okay, so let's move ahead. Another one is alliteration. Alliteration. And of course, you know that an alliteration is the repetition of same consonant sounds at the initial level of words within a line, at the initial level. Now let's look at consonant sounds here. We have tell my tales. Here you have t, and here you also have t. So repetition of the same consonant sound t. That gives you an alliteration. And that helps the musicality of the poem. Then we also have another one, widow, woman. So here you have we and you have sound hui, the semi-vowel sound. Okay? Now you also have broiled bacon. Broiled bacon to describe the food, you know, that she usually have. And then others include dry ditch, repetition of the sound d, feathers flaming, repetition of the sound f, and then hard work for exercise and heart's content. So here you have repetition of the glottal sound h, the one you call h. So this is an alliteration, and these are major alliterations you find in the poem. You can explore the poem for more. Okay? We also have the use of onomatopoeia, like crowing. Don't forget that onomatopoeia is a representation of sounds using words, or representation of meaning using words that are sounds in themselves. So we have crowing, we have sing, we have organ blowing. All these appeals to the sense of, you know, hearing, and their imageries too. Okay, now we also have hyperbole. Hyperbole. Here we have far, far more regular than any clock. Just like I expressed the other time, that she's always on point. E is always from that. Chanticleer is always on point when it comes to crowing. So it's as though some people in the society do not even check their clocks anymore. Once they hear Chanticleer crow, they know that it's time, or the time is set. And then we also have the use of epizeusis. What's an epizeusis? Epizeusis is the repetition of same word without any intervening word. So here you see, when he was talking about far, far more regular, he did not allow any word to come in between the first far and the second far. That kind of repetition is referred to as epizeusis, and this is just to explain how perfect and how blessed Chanticleer is. Okay, now let's look at the question. Briefly explain the poetic devices used in the poem. By doing this, first of all, you are expected to tell us a little bit about the poem. You know, it's a story. It's a narrative poem. So you should just give us a background to the poem. What happened to the widow woman? What happened to Chanticleer? And how did he survive? After telling us all that, you present us with the themes, the central themes of the poem in that same paragraph. Now that will serve as your introduction. Okay? Don't forget that we have mentioned the theme of love, theme of the problems of excessive flattery, which is a very significant one. We also have poverty. Now, after mentioning all that, then you go ahead in each paragraph, pick one poetic device, just like we have done, and explain how they were used in the poem with adequate reference to the poem. How was this poetic device used? You tell us what the poetic device is. You explain what it means, the meaning. For instance, onomatopoeia, like I explained, repetitions of meaning with sounds. Okay? And then you pick one thing, one reference or one line of the poem that shows onomatopoeia, or even 2 or 3, as much as you can. You tell us about the crowing, tell us about the organ blowing, and many more. You have picked one, then you explain why the poet chose that device. Of course, to tell us how beautifully Chanticleer and his wife, Lady Petalot, sings. Okay, so you cannot tell us the device and leave it that way. You must tell us why. Explain why was that device used. All right, and after you have done that, please make sure that you conclude. Ensure that you conclude by giving us your own opinion, which of course is in line with the opinion of the poets at the end of your answer. Thank you very much for listening. If you have questions, if you have comments, please don't hesitate to reach us on our social media and displayed on the screen.
Acing your WAEC and NECO examinations has been made easy by the Lagos State Ministry of Basic and Secondary Education with the Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO Candidates television program. Join seasoned teachers as they take you through these core subjects, targeting the exact syllabus of WAEC and NECO. Watch Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates through these social media platforms to access more educational content and give their feedback. Eko Learners Support for WAEC and NECO candidates. Pass your examinations with flying colors.